What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Carson Wagner Show. Today is Tuesday, December 2nd. We're going to be breaking down two recent stories today that happened in the past week or so, and they perfectly illustrate why Americans elected Donald Trump and not Kamala Harris, and why the left is just freaking out and losing their minds as usual over Trump's policies that are actually effective and actually working for the nation. The first story is something I'm sure you've heard about, very sad. An Afghan refugee, quote unquote, that Biden brought to America under Operation Allies Welcome, murdered a National Guardsman in D.C. and critically wounded another last week in what the FBI is calling an act of terrorism. This is what happens, just as a sneak peek, when you prioritize compassion over national security. First, it doesn't work. Second, it should never be prioritized over national security because national security is always more important. It's not the government's job to have compassion on these people. It's their job to ensure our national security. We're going to be breaking that down. We're going to be getting into it and explaining what it means for the future of immigration into the U.S., what it means for the future of National Guard deployments to other cities, and various connected things that are important to American society as we know it right now. The second story is the fake news media, as Trump would call it, is melting down. Nothing new there. They've been doing that since the beginning of 2025 because they really can't handle anything. And it's, I think, starting to get on a lot of our nerves. But they're melting down again for the 500th time because Secretary of War, I like saying that. Secretary of War sounds so much cooler than Secretary of Defense. But Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is actually killing drug traffickers and defending our borders before they can get here and poison America and kill Americans through fentanyl ODs and all the drugs that they're bringing into our nation, which we obviously don't want here. But apparently, defending America is now a war crime. And the Democrats are framing it like that. So we're going to break down the facts. If you haven't already and you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like, comment. If you have any questions, criticisms, extra episode topics you want me to talk about, literally anything else, you can comment down below. You can also email me at thecarsonwagnershow@gmail.com. If you want to get emails every time I release a new episode, you can go to thecarsonwagnershow.substack.com and sign up there to get emails every time I release a new episode. Alternatively, if you're on a podcast player like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or somewhere else, please don't forget to give us a 5-star rating. Everyone who does that boosts the algorithm just a little bit more and helps spread the message to a lot more people. So if you haven't already, go do that. As always, if you have any questions, criticisms, anything else, I'll say this again, you can comment down below or you can email me at thecarsonwagnershow@gmail.com. Without further ado, let's get into our episode. All right, so first off, the D.C. terror attack. What's up with that? On November 26th, the day before Thanksgiving, 2 West Virginia National Guard members were ambushed and shot near the White House in downtown D.C. The suspect, 29-year-old Rahmanullah Lakanwal, who's an Afghan national that came over here in Operation Allies Welcome, he opened fire at 2:15 p.m. near the Farragut West Metro station, just 2 blocks from the White House, uncomfortably close. A little too close for comfort. Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, 20 years old, from Summersville, West Virginia. She was hit and she died on November 27th after undergoing extensive emergency surgery. Specialist Andrew Wolfe, 24, from Martinsburg, West Virginia, was critically wounded with multiple gunshot wounds. And as of the last update I heard today, he is still in critical condition in the hospital, but he is expected to survive at this point. DC Mayor Muriel Bowser and law enforcement immediately called this a pre-planned targeted attack. This wasn't just random violence. This guy didn't just see Guardsmen walking by and want to do something about it. It was very planned. There was obviously some sort of motivation behind it, and it was an ambush. It was premeditated. Video footage obtained by the Wall Street Journal shows Lakanwal brandishing a gun, firing at the Guardsman. One Guardsman was shot and went down. Then Lakanwal leaned over and shot her again while she was on the ground. Wolfe was struck multiple times. Another Guardsman engaged the shooter and wounded him. Lakanwal was subdued and later taken into custody, where he is right now. The weapon is a .357 Magnum Smith & Wesson revolver that wasn't even registered to him. It belonged to a deceased Washington resident. It's going to be really interesting to see where he got that gun, if someone supplied it to him or if he stole it somehow. After shooting the guardswoman, though, he picked up her firearm to continue shooting and trying to injure the other guardsman. So who is this dude? What on earth is up with him? Well, this is where it gets infuriating. Lakanwal is an Afghan national who worked with the CIA and the U.S. military in Afghanistan as part of a partner force in Kandahar. His service ended in 2021 after Biden's disastrous Afghan withdrawal. And on September 8th, 2021, during Biden's chaotic evacuation, he was flown to the U.S. under Operation Allies Welcome. He and his family fled Taliban threats in the Khost province and were relocated to Kabul before being eventually transferred over to America, where he has been this entire time. He was paroled into the U.S. on humanitarian grounds, just one of the hundreds of thousands that Biden let in without minimal vetting. In 2024, Lakanwal applied for asylum, and in April 2025, under the Trump administration, his asylum application was granted after what authorities claim was proper vetting. Well, apparently it wasn't proper vetting. Lakanwal was living in Bellingham, Washington, with his wife and 5 children working for Amazon Flex. Then he drove across the entire country to Washington, D.C. with one purpose: to ambush and murder American soldiers who are out there serving our country, getting control of Washington, D.C. again, and trying to protect residents there. President Trump, spending Thanksgiving at Mar-a-Lago, released a video statement calling this an act of hatred and an act of terror. He said, based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who has entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth. Trump immediately ordered the re-examination of every Afghan national who entered under Biden. Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, announced, quote, the suspect who shot our brave National Guardsman is an Afghan national who is one of the many unvetted, mass paroled into the United States under Operation Allies Welcome on September 8th, 2021, under the Biden administration, end quote. U.S. CIS, the Citizenship and Immigration Services Department, immediately halted all immigration applications for Afghan nationals, pending a full security review of the current Afghan nationals inside the United States and their process for vetting those nationals. Joseph Edlow, the director, it's early in the morning, I can't speak today, announced a full-scale, rigorous re-examination of every green card that was granted for every alien from every country of concern. Countries of concern are countries that the State Department lists as potentially holding terrorists or potentially being in a state of enmity towards the United States. And of course, if anyone comes in from a country of concern, the job of the CIS and the job of the DHS is to keep their eye on them and vet them properly to make sure that they're not someone who is here to harm the United States or act in a manner that would be contrary to the purposes and the interests of United States citizens. Trump also did order 500 additional National Guard troops to D.C. to just establish a very, very strong presence in the city and make everyone understand this is not going to happen again. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro announced Lakanwal is being charged with first-degree murder, 3 counts of assault with intent to kill while armed, and possession of a firearm during a crime of violence. Those charges could potentially be upgraded depending on whether or not the Guardsman, Wolfe, survives his stay in the hospital. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed they're investigating this as an act of terrorism and examining Lakanwal's background and associates overseas and in the United States. Okay, so obviously this is very tragic. This whole thing is very tragic, very sad, and it never should have happened. Could have been very easily prevented, but why does all of this matter? Why is, in terms of the big picture and in terms of the broader societal context, why does this matter? These National Guard members were in D.C. because Trump deployed them as part of his federal takeover of D.C.'s crime crisis. Back in August, Trump sent 2,188 National Guard personnel into the city to make D.C. safe again, because Mayor Muriel Bowser and et al., they could not handle Washington, D.C., which, let me just give you a lesson here. Democrats cannot handle cities. They cannot handle really running anything. These kinds of Democrats. you've got two different types of Democrats, and this is very much oversimplifying things, but there are two big types of Democrats that we deal with today, that we see today. The first is the aging out, rapidly diminishing side of the Democrat Party, which is they're kind of like classical liberals. Think like John Fetterman or RFK Jr., people who still believe in America, still believe in American exceptionalism and freedom and all the principles, the core values that we would really stand for, with some exceptions. And they're willing to work alongside anyone who wants to make America exceptional, make America great again, and make America the wealthiest, the most powerful, and just the greatest country with the highest standard of living and the highest quality of living of any country ever. That's one kind of Democrat. Those are the kind of Democrats that I could get along with just fine, and that many of Trump's officials and many Republicans are getting along with just fine right now. The other kind of Democrat is the side that has really taken over the party in the last 10 or 15 years or so, which is radical socialists and Marxists. And these are the people in charge of America's cities. Marxism does not work. Socialism does not work. Radical leftism does not work. Wokeism does not work. You want proof? Look at Chicago, look at LA, look at New York, look at Houston, look at Seattle, look at Washington, D.C., look at Atlanta. Go pick any big city in the U.S. you want. And the thing is literally a smoking trash heap. Like, D.C. might be one of the only clean cities in the U.S. right now. Big cities. Let's say with a population over 700,000. We'll qualify that. Well, that's the definition of a big city, and for my purposes. Any city over 700,000 that you pick in the U.S., the crime will be through the roof. Prices will be through the roof. Things will be just insanity. Things will just be pure insanity. That's really true wherever you go in the U.S. That's really true, no matter what anyone tells you. That's true. You can't get away from it. The reason is that Democrats are in charge of these cities. I often think it's funny. I live in California, and I see everywhere, the Democrats always talking, because my state is very Democrat supermajority, has a big Democrat supermajority. It's very just filled to the brim with Democrats, and Democrats are running, and they're always talking about rebuilding California to be this great paradise. And I look at them and I say, you've had control of California for a very, very long time, and you have had unhindered control. And California has turned into the worst state in the nation. The worst state in the nation. So what are you rebuilding? What are you rebuilding? Are you admitting that you made mistakes? That California needs to be rebuilt? And that in the 15, 20 years that you have had just complete, unfettered, unhindered control of California, you haven't managed to rebuild it as if it needed rebuilding before? Our state is tens of billions of dollars into a deficit right now. Our debt is unbelievable. Gas prices are through the roof. The cost of living is just astronomical. Police can't do their jobs. We can't get guns. We can't do almost anything. I cannot buy a Nerf gun on Amazon and get it shipped to California. I'm not joking. I cannot buy a Nerf gun on Amazon. This is what our state has come to, and it's because it's Democrat run. So take note of this. Democrats cannot run cities. Marxism does not work. Socialism does not work. The reason it does not work is because it is inherently soft, and you cannot be inherently soft when you're running. And to be fair, Marxism and socialism carried all the way through is inherently hard, actually. And you get people like Stalin, who was far left, but he was he ruled with an iron fist. He was and by the way, Moscow under Stalin was a very clean place. It was very crime free. It was a horrible place because people are getting, you think the wrong thoughts and you get sent to the gulag. And of course that's horrible. And Stalin should never have been allowed to get into power. But there wasn't crime. So just take note of that and realize, again, I'm not saying that Stalin having his, iron-fisted kind of rule and just lording it over all of his subjects and being an absolute tyrant and a disgusting tyrant too was a good thing. No, it was a very bad thing. And that's also not how you rule a city or any place. But I'm using that to show that on that extreme end of the spectrum, Moscow had very, very little crime. It was almost non-existent. That's just a historical fact. You can look it up. So you need strong people in charge of a city or a country or whatever it is. You can't have radical leftists who do not have a backbone. Brandon Johnson does not have a backbone. J.B. Pritzker, There's the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago. They don't have backbones. Chicago is, people are just regularly getting murdered there on just a regular basis. And it is absolutely out of control because Brandon Johnson has spent his entire career hindering the police from doing their jobs. He spent his entire career letting criminals out of prison and out of jail and onto the streets. Now those criminals are out there murdering innocent people day after day after day. They're murdering each other. So much horrible stuff is going on. It's unbelievable. And they just say, oh, we don't need National Guard. Chicago is fine. Trump doesn't need to intervene. Well, no. Washington, D.C. is crime-free. And your city is burning down. It's a smoking trash heap. Literally a dumpster on fire, floating downstream a river into the sea. That's what your city is right now. It's not even going to survive for much longer. This is like an absolute crisis, kind of emergency moment. But still, they don't want Trump's help. Democrats are, in this sense, radical leftists are the most incompetent leaders you can possibly have. They are the most incompetent leaders. You need someone who is willing to use very strong force against criminals. And this is, again, policy is extremely complicated. Leading a big area is extremely complicated. I am talking strictly here about crime policy. Crime policy is very simple. You got one guy with a gun trying to do something bad. Bring two good guys with guns to stop him. That's it. You incentivize what you want more of. You incentivize the behavior that you want more of. You disincentivize the behavior you want less of. It's so ridiculous that this even needs to be said. But the woke, radical leftists that have taken over our universities, that have taken over the entire public school system, that have taken over every city, big city in America, and that had our government under their control for 4 years, and are fighting to get it back under their control. This is what they believe. They believe you can incentivize crime in cities and get less of it. It truly is legitimately insane that anyone could believe this. Like it's just a functioning way of leadership, a functioning, modus operandi. But they do. So, big rabbit trail. I just want to go down that to show you Democrat leadership is not good. It's never been good since the radical leftists have taken over the party. JFK could lead a country. JFK was a classical liberal. He's someone I could get along with very, very easily. He could lead a country. He was a fantastic leader. I think he did a lot of very, very good things. Do we have policy disagreements? Do I have a policy disagreement with him? Yeah, I do have some policy disagreements. And he was still a fantastic leader. And if the choice right today was between JFK and someone like Tim Walz or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, I would pick JFK in a heartbeat. JFK was, in a lot of senses, a very, very good president, despite being a Democrat. But since the radical leftists have taken over the party, they have totally transformed everything about it. So, back to the issue at hand. Trump deployed these National Guardsmen into D.C. because the Democrats could not take care of their own city. They're given control of it, and they can't run anything. And so, as a result, crime ensued, chaos ensued, and the city was burning to the ground. And Trump took control of it with the National Guard. He's been a businessman for a very long time. He knows how things work in the real world. He's out there touching grass on a daily basis, apparently. Democrats are not. Muriel Bowser is not touching grass on a daily basis. But Trump knows how reality works. So he sent those National Guard personnel to D.C. to make D.C. safe again. And just the day before the attack, during the traditional turkey pardoning, Trump said D.C. was one of the most unsafe places anywhere in the United States, but it is now considered a totally safe city. And then that week, an Afghan refugee that Biden imported murdered one of those guardsmen and left the other in critical condition. Now, some will say, well, Trump's administration is equally at fault because they granted him asylum in April 2025. Yes, because Biden created an impossible situation. When you mass parole 80,000 Afghans with minimal vetting during a chaotic and just disastrous evacuation, then those people apply for asylum years later. What exactly is the vetting process supposed to catch? The damage was already done in 2021. Trump inherited Biden's mess. The fact is that Lakanwal, the shooter, should have never been in America in the first place. He was brought here under Biden's Operation Allies Welcome, a program that prioritized speed over safety. This isn't the first time. NBC News noted, quote, "This is not the first time an Afghan national who came to the United States after supporting the United States mission in Afghanistan has faced questions about terrorism. There have been multiple cases." The Trump administration is now doing what should have been done from day one, rigorously reviewing everyone Biden let in. Well, better late than never. And now here's the hypocrisy in all of this. Where were the Democrats when Biden abandoned Bagram Air Base, left $85 billion in military equipment to the Taliban, and got 13 service members killed at Abbey Gate? Where were they when Biden was flying in tens of thousands of unvetted Afghans? Silent. Completely silent. Not a word. Nobody said anything. Now, Trump starts cleaning up the mess, and Democrats are crying about anti-immigrant rhetoric. No, this is about national security. This is about keeping Americans safe. This is about not letting people who want to kill us walk freely into our country. Sarah Beckstrom was 20 years old. She was serving her country. She volunteered to be there on Thanksgiving because other service members didn't want to. She was trying to make D.C. safe, and she was murdered by someone that Biden imported. That's the bottom line. So in other news, the Trump administration has conducted over 20 military strikes on suspected drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific Ocean since September 2nd, killing more than 83 people. They're not random attacks, despite what people tell you. They are targeted strikes on vessels that are trafficking drugs to our shores, drugs that kill 100,000 plus Americans every single year. On September 2nd, 2025, the first airstrike was carried out under Operation Southern Spear on a boat in the Caribbean associated with Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang that Trump, back in January of 2025, designated as a terrorist organization. The strike killed 11 people. Trump posted a video of it on social media with the caption, "Watch our Navy blow up a drug boat from Venezuela." He later warned drug traffickers, "Be warned, if you are transporting drugs that can kill Americans, we are hunting you." This is what real leadership looks like. This is what actually America First looks like. This is what protecting our citizens looks like. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, man, again, I love that. I love that name. So much better than Defense Secretary. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced, quote, "This is the first lethal kinetic strike against narco-terrorists trafficking drugs toward America," end quote. He vowed to find and terminate every vessel with the intention of drafting drugs to America to poison our citizens. So the strikes continued. On September 15th, there were 3 killed in the second strike. September 16th, there was a third strike. On September 19th, there was a strike on a vessel affiliated with a designated terrorist organization, which was with Dominican. It was carried out through Dominican Republic cooperation. On October 16th and 17th, there were multiple strikes, including one on an alleged Colombian ELN vessel, which is hugely important. On October 24th, there was the first strike at night against an alleged Tren de Aragua vessel with 6 killed. And on November 1st, there was a strike that was directly at the direction of President Trump, and there were 3 killed. The total is 22 plus strikes, 83 plus people killed, and multiple vessels destroyed. Here's where the fake news gets involved. The Washington Post, horrible newspaper, by the way. I would never recommend that you read the Washington Post unless it's just to laugh your head off. Reported that on November 28th, during the September 2nd strike, the initial attack left 2 survivors in the water. And according to the Post's anonymous sources who didn't identify themselves, and their identities are not implied or made clear in the article at all, Secretary of War Hegseth allegedly gave a verbal order to kill everybody and leave no survivors. Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley, who commanded the operation, allegedly ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's directive, killing 2 survivors who, according to the Washington Post, were in the water trying to swim away from the boat, and they were blown apart in the water. The Post sources claim that Hegseth wanted no survivors so they couldn't call other traffickers to retrieve them and the cargo. Bradley allegedly told personnel that the survivors were legitimate targets. The response, of course, Hegseth immediately called this fabricated, inflammatory, and derogatory reporting. He posted on X, quote, "As we've said from the beginning, these highly effective strikes are specifically intended to be lethal kinetic strikes. The declared intent is to stop lethal drugs, destroy narco boats, and kill the narco-terrorists who are poisoning the American people." He added, quote, "Our current operations in the Caribbean are lawful under both U.S. and international law, with all actions in compliance with the law of armed conflict and approved by the best military and civilian lawyers up and down the chain of command, end quote. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said the entire narrative is completely false. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said, "I would reject that the Secretary of War ever said that. However, the president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists are trafficking illegal drugs towards the United States, he has the authority to kill them, and that's what this administration is doing," which is obviously true. If these people are bringing drugs to our borders, which are poisoning tons of American citizens, many of them kids and teenagers, they ought to die. Just they ought to die. And that's obviously what the American military has always done to protect our borders and to protect anyone who is going to act in a manner that is directly contrary to the interests of the American people. They end them. That's how the American military works. I don't know what else the military would be for. So, of course, once we get a sane Secretary of Defense, not Austin, a sane Secretary of Defense like Hegseth, and he starts doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, which is changing their stupid name back to War Department, not Defense Department, and then actually defending our country, which is a first. So, it's crazy that we actually have a Defense Secretary now, or a War Secretary that is defending our country. Pretty insane. I know that should not be abnormal. It's hilarious that's abnormal, but it is abnormal. On Monday, Leavitt clarified that Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct those kinetic strikes, which were the second strikes after the boat got destroyed. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the U.S. of A was eliminated. So President Trump said on Air Force One on Sunday he wouldn't have personally wanted a second strike, but Hegseth told him that he didn't order the death of those two men, and Trump said he has great confidence in Hegseth. On Monday, Leavitt clarified for everybody, quote, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct those kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated, end quote. Admiral Bradley was promoted after this operation to end up leading U.S. Special Operations Command, which is a very, very high, prestigious command post. Hegseth posted, quote, Admiral Bradley is an American hero, a true professional, and has my 100% support. I stand by him and the combat decisions he has made. So far, all good. But the problem is there's a lot of outrage, fake outrage going on. Democrats and the media are screaming war crimes. Senator Chris Van Hollen said it's very possible that there was a war crime committed, referring specifically to the September 2nd incident. Senator Mark Kelly, yes, the same Mark Kelly under investigation for his sedition video, said killing survivors could be over a line. Legal experts are claiming that these are extrajudicial killings and murder because drug traffickers aren't combatants. This is absurd. Completely absurd for multiple reasons. First, these are combatants. So the Trump administration formally declared in September 2025, the United States is in an armed conflict with drug cartels designated as terrorist organizations. Tren de Aragua, the Cartel de las Soles in Venezuela, the ELN in Colombia. These are all designated terrorist organizations and have been since Trump took office in January of 2025. When you're affiliated with a designated terrorist organization and you're actively transporting weapons, drugs, that kill Americans, you're not a civilian, you are an enemy combatant, and you deserve to be treated as one. Second, the legal framework exists for the authorization of those follow-up strikes to eliminate all the enemy combatants. The DOJ issued a legal memo stating that military personnel involved in these strikes won't face criminal prosecution. Why? Because they're operating under direct authorization from the commander-in-chief against designated terrorist organizations that are presenting an immediate threat to American national security. Every strike has been approved by military and civilian lawyers up and down the chain of command. These aren't rogue operations, they are authorized military actions. Third, these drugs are killing Americans. Fentanyl and other drugs trafficked by these cartels kill over 100,000 Americans every year. That's more Americans than died in the entire Vietnam War, every single year. These drugs are weapons of mass destruction being leveled against the American people. Trump said it perfectly. Each boat is responsible for killing 25,000 Americans. And it's working. Trump has seriously minimized the amount of drugs coming into our country by sea. It's down to a very, very small amount. and it's very hard for them to get here. And cartel members have just come flat out and said, it is very hard for us now to do our jobs, which is as it should be. This is the whole goal here is deterrence. When drug traffickers know they'll be blown up by the U.S. Navy for what they're doing, they stop trafficking. Simple. Again, you disincentivize what you want less of, and you incentivize what you want more of. The Democrats are trying to incentivize drug trafficking. They want more drugs to be brought across our border into the homeland, into America, to poison and kill hundreds of thousands of Americans every year. Those are the Democrats in public office. Those are the Democrats that are running our cities and our universities and are poisoning the minds of the next generation to try to accept this kind of just total trash. Total trash. Here's where it gets really good, though. Dr. Brian Cox, who's a former Army judge advocate, which is just an Army lawyer, Cornell Law Professor, and one of the top experts on the law of armed conflict in the country, completely dismantled the war crimes accusation. He said it's totally ridiculous. And he did it by pointing out that the critics are really dumb, and they obviously don't understand basic military law. So let me break down his argument. First is the hors de combat lie. The critics claim that the two survivors were hors de combat, which is a French legal term meaning out of combat or unable to fight. Under the Geneva Conventions, you can't kill people who are hors de combat. That's true. You can't kill survivors like that who are no longer able to fight. But here's the catch that Cox points out. According to the Department of Defense Law of War Manual, which was updated in 2015 under Obama, a person is only hors de combat when they are under circumstances where it is feasible for the opposing party to accept their surrender. Think about this. Two drug traffickers are clinging to a burning boat wreckage in the Caribbean. There are no U.S. personnel nearby to accept their surrender. They're on an active military objective. The boat is still mostly in one piece, and it is still a threat. Their mission is to destroy the boat and to eliminate the terrorist threat. Are these men actually hors de combat? Are they out of the fight? No, because it's not feasible to accept their surrender in the middle of the ocean during an active strike operation. They're still on the target. The boat is still the objective. The objective has not been finished yet. The mission needs to be finalized. Cox shows that under the actual law, not the critics' fantasy version of the law, continuing the strike was 100% legal. Second, there's the no quarter fabrication. Critics are claiming that Hegseth ordered no quarter, which means refusing to accept surrender and killing everyone regardless of whatever other contextual details might pop out. This is a war crime. You can't declare no quarter. But he also points out that this is anonymous double hearsay. Unnamed sources claiming someone said that Hegseth verbally said, kill everybody. Even if he said those words, context matters. Was this a literal order to commit war crimes? Or was it military shorthand, just meaning destroy the target completely? Or was it something else entirely? We have no context. We can't trust that statement until we have full context and we know what was actually going on. The critics are treating this paraphrased phrase, which could have been taken out of any conversation Hegseth had, as a verbatim war crime confession. That's absurd for obvious reasons. And as Cox notes, context, interpretation, and battlefield exceptions all matter. The anonymous Judge Advocate General letter ignores all of that. Third, the pending international law scam. So get this, the anonymous Judge Advocate letter that they sent to the Washington Post, the critics in the letter cite additional Protocol 2 of the Geneva Conventions as evidence that all of this is illegal. Here's the one problem. The United States never ratified that particular part of the Geneva Conventions. We're not bound by it. So Cox calls this the invention of pending IHL, International Humanitarian Law, which is the idea that America should follow laws we never agreed to just because critics wish we had. That's not how law works. That's not how law works. The whole thing is ridiculous. Fourth, the real legal framework, the DoD Law of War Manual, again, written under a Democrat president, Obama, is crystal clear. During strikes on military objectives, people on or near that objective who cannot feasibly surrender are not protected. The boat was the target. The survivors were on the target. The mission was to destroy the target. That's legal. What they did was 100% above board. Cox's conclusion is that the war crimes accusation is entirely unconvincing and built on fundamental misstatements of the law, misreadings of the facts, and a dangerously destabilizing narrative. The double standard, of course, as usual, is insane. Obama droned American citizens without trial. Biden left Afghanistan in chaos and got 13 service members killed. But then Trump goes on to kill actual narco-terrorists who are poisoning Americans and presenting a direct threat to the safety and national security of our nation. And suddenly the left cares about international law and humanitarian law. Give me a break. Just give me a break. And by the way, Admiral Bradley, who commanded this operation, was promoted to lead U.S. Special Operations Command after the strike. If it was a war crime, would the military promote him? Of course not. There are 3 million members of the United States military who are currently on active duty. You cannot tell me that every single one of those members would have seen that and not spoken up and said something, especially since there are a lot of members who disagree politically with people like Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth and a lot of the higher-ups. They'd be crying wolf, and they'd be not crying wolf. That's a bad example. They'd be screaming about it. They'd be shrieking about it. You get it all over the news. The Washington Post, if this was credible, would have used their testimony, not the testimony of these anonymous sources who claim to be military lawyers who are giving all these really, really lame facts why it was a war crime. And then, of course, the United Kingdom, the Washington Post reported not long ago that the United Kingdom stopped sharing intelligence about drug boats because they believe the attacks are illegal and they don't want to be complicit in them. Good. We don't need the UK's permission to defend America. This is our country. We will defend it no matter the cost. The UK can get out of it. No one cares about the UK at this point. They are a burning trash heap. They've got their own problems that they need to deal with. Their immigration problem is unbelievable. They need to fix that before they fix anything else. And then the next step would be firing half of Parliament and Keir Starmer. But they've got their own issues. We don't need their help. This is our country. We are the greatest country in the world. America is exceptional. We are able to defend ourselves, and we're going to continue to do so. The UK can frown disapprovingly on that all they want. No one cares. And if they want to coddle drug traffickers, that's their problem. We don't like drug traffickers here. We eliminate drug traffickers. And that's why, again, we are the greatest country in the world, and that's why we're so exceptional. We will handle our own national security. Now, again, zoom out, big picture. Why do both of these stories matter? Well, the two stories, the DC terror attack and the boat strikes, they perfectly illustrate the choice that America faces. The Biden approach is to import tens of thousands of unvetted refugees who could very possibly be terrorists, coddle enemies, let drugs flood across the border, kill hundreds of thousands of American citizens, and treat national security as a secondary concern. The result is dead Americans, lots of them. The Trump approach is to secure the border, kill terrorists before they kill us, review and deport threats, and put America first. The result is safety. The left's response, instead of supporting these common sense policies, which some common sense leftists are doing, some common sense Democrats, I should say, like RFK and others, they're investigating Mark Kelly for sedition because he is undermining military authority. This is what the left does. They start committing sedition instead of supporting these policies that are obviously beneficial to the United States. And even if you didn't believe that theoretically, just look at the results. They're so much better just in terms of results. Trump has sent the amount of drugs that have come over the border since Trump became president has gone through the floor as compared to when Biden was president, when there was a literal fentanyl crisis going on. This is because what Trump is doing actually works, but they can't admit that. Because again, their only standard in life is orange man bad. That's it. Whatever Trump does is bad. Whatever he doesn't do is good. The Democrats are busy screaming about war crimes when we kill drug traffickers, and they cry about anti-immigrant rhetoric when we review Afghan refugees after one literally commits terrorism and kills National Guardsmen. They're not serious about national security. They're serious about undermining Trump and the rest of the Republicans. Sarah Beckstrom is dead because Joe Biden's administration prioritized political correctness over vetting. How many more Americans have to die before Democrats admit their policies do not work? Drug traffickers are being actively deterred, because Pete Hegseth and the American military are actually killing them and putting an end to drug trafficking. How many American lives are being saved right now because the border is closed and drugs are not flowing over it, and because the current administration is taking the threat seriously? Donald Trump was elected to put America first. That means keeping Americans safe, even when it's controversial, even when the UK doesn't like you, even when the Democrats don't like you, even when the media melts down, and when the leftists start screaming. An Afghan refugee murdered a National Guard member in D.C. Trump immediately ordered a review of all Afghan refugees that came in under Operation Allies Welcome, and he halted new applications. That's leadership. Drug traffickers are killing 100,000 plus Americans per year with fentanyl and other drugs. Trump ordered the military to blow up their boats. That's defending America. The left hates both of those policies because they actually work. They would rather virtue signal about compassion and international law because they cannot get over their pride and they cannot admit that they're wrong about things. And they're fine with letting Americans die as long as they don't have to get on television and admit that they're wrong about something. Folks, I will take Trump's approach every time. And to prove to you that I'm the opposite of the Democrats and that people on my side are on the opposite of the Democrats, I would happily be a Democrat if the Democrats were the ones doing this, putting America first. I'd be a Democrat so fast, it'd be hilarious. I'd be wearing a Biden-Harris cap, waving a little blue flag, dressing up as a donkey for Halloween. I'd be a Democrat like that. But the Republicans are the ones actually doing this. Democrats aren't. So that's why I am a Republican. I will, again, take Trump's approach every single time. Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom is not coming home today. She never got to see her family for another Thanksgiving or another Christmas. And the reason is directly because of the Biden administration. They are directly guilty for letting that migrant in who then killed her. Her service and sacrifice are not going to be forgotten. If the Democrats were in control, they would want her service and her sacrifice to be forgotten. But we're not going to let that happen. It will not be forgotten. And we will remember this for all of history as a perfect example of what happens when Democrats are allowed to take control over our country, which is just pure chaos and rampant crime and immediate direct threats to the national security of that country. That's all for now, folks. I will see you next time on The Carson Wagner Show. Again, if you're on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment, turn on notifications. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. You can comment if you have any questions, critiques, criticisms, suggestions for other episodes, or literally anything else. You can also email me at thecarsonwagnershow@gmail.com. You can go to The Carson Wagner Show at .substack.com and sign up to receive emails every time I drop a new episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon.